Good morning, and thank you for joining us today. For folks who are just entering, there are definitely more seats up here at the front. I know it's a little intimidating, but I see at least 7, maybe 10 seats up in the first couple rows, so come on in. My name is Kate DeKramer. I work at the State Housing Finance Commission. I'm the Senior Sustainable Energy Analyst. And before I get started, I want to make just a couple of housekeeping announcements. I was just alerted that at 11 a.m., everyone's cell phone will go off for the statewide emergency test. So if you could please take a moment to silence your phone, put it on airplane mode. That's also a great way for us to keep an eye on the time. At 11, we'll all know. So just take a moment to do that now, please. So at the Commission, I manage a sustainable energy trust, which is a revolving loan fund for energy efficiency upgrades and renewable energy. I may have worked with some of you before, but we work closely with affordable housing owners, providers, and developers. I also advise on energy and climate-related issues for our bond and tax credit programs. So we gathered this panel here today because we wanted to offer several different perspectives on the changing landscape of energy and energy incentives. Before I move any further, can you all hear me okay? Just want to do a quick sound check. Okay, I'm seeing thumbs up in the back. A little louder? I'm so tall, I'm gonna have to bend over, that's fine. All right. One moment. Is that better? Great, thank you. So we were very lucky this morning to hear from Governor Inslee to sort of kick off some of this discussion around the intersection between housing and energy-related issues. As some of you know, the Federal Inflation Reduction Act passed last year, which was a historic climate and energy bill to the tune of about $370 billion. So today's presentation mentions some resources included in that bill as well as others. The main question our panelists will be speaking to is, what do you need to know as affordable housing owners, developers, and professionals about energy in Washington state, and some resources to cover some of the costs. We're not offering any magic bullets today, but we do have a lot of wisdom and perspective on current issues that we'd like to offer. We can't cover every available program today, and I doubt you would want us to. That would definitely take us past 11. So our presentation will conclude with a link to a Commission's resource library about energy incentives, and I recommend you take a look. So without further ado, I am very pleased to welcome here today Emily Salzberg, the Managing Director for the Building Standards and Performance Unit at the Washington State Department of Commerce, David Reddy, the Building Performance Principal at O'Brien 360, Erika Coveny, the Energy Programs Administrator at WSU Energy Program, and Max Benson, the Real Estate Development Director at Community Frameworks, a nonprofit rental housing developer. And for those who just entered, I see like 5 more seats up here at the front, so please don't be shy. If you'd like to sit down, come on up. There's also a bunch here on your right as you walk in. So each of our presenters today will give a short presentation. Please think of any questions that you have, and at the end of all 4 presentations, we'll hold about 10-12 minutes for questions. If there are other questions that haven't been answered, please just come find us after the panel or reach out afterwards. So with that, I will introduce Emily Salzberg. She's the Managing Director for the Building Standards and Performance Unit, as I mentioned, where she currently oversees the Washington State's Clean Buildings Law. She's over 20 years of experience administering, evaluating, and providing technical assistance for energy efficiency programs in the Northwest. I'll pass it over to you, Emily.
All right, Kate, I've got the opposite problem here. Can everybody hear me okay? Okay. Well, good morning. Thank you so much for having me here today. As Kate mentioned, I'm the Managing Director of our Building Standards and Performance Unit, which is housed within the State Energy Office at Department of Commerce. So I oversee a talented team that's working hard on codes, standards, and programs that are focused on the built environment. There we go. Slides are catching up. In today's presentation, I'm going to focus on probably about 3 hours of content in 8 minutes. Right, Kate? 8 minutes? Okay. So I'm going to talk fast and keep it pretty high level. Key takeaway is jot down the contact information on the last slide. We are incredibly responsive. If you have any questions that come up, we're happy to spend time talking with you about incentives, grants that are available, and then also our clean building standard that I'm going to talk about real briefly. So at the Department of Commerce, our mission is to strengthen communities, and we do that through a very broad range of policy and programs focused on housing and homelessness, on crime victim advocacy, business development, and energy, and everything in between. So that's the work that I do is situated within the State Energy Office. So I want to start just real briefly with setting some context here in Washington State in the built environment. So buildings are responsible for 27% of our greenhouse gas emissions in the state, second only to transportation. And it's very important to keep in mind, this is the sector that emissions are growing the fastest. So our emissions from the building sector are growing faster than even transportation. So we have a lot of work to do. The state has greenhouse gas emissions limits in statute, and we need to make progress towards reducing emissions from the built environment in addition to all of our sectors that are emitting carbon. Back in 2019, there was a law that passed, the Clean Energy Transformation Act, that required Commerce to update the state energy strategy. So we did that through a 27-member advisory group. There was a lot of modeling and discussion that happened about the built environment. Two key takeaways from the state energy strategy: if we're going to meet our greenhouse gas emissions limits in statute, two strategies in the building sector: efficiency and conservation. So we want buildings to be operating as efficiently as possible. And then electrification. So as our grid transitions to clean electricity, using electricity as our primary heating fuel is going to be the least emitting. So those are the two least cost pathways from the state energy strategy. So as a result, the state has queued up a number of different policies that are focusing on reducing emissions from the building sector. When we take a step back and think about the building sector, there's new construction, and that is governed by the Washington State Energy Code. So that is what governs the efficiency of buildings, new buildings that are built today. The most difficult sector to address is existing buildings here in the state of Washington, and we have millions of them. So there was a lot of work that we needed to do and prioritize. Arguably, that is some of the hardest work that we have in front of us, is doing work in existing construction. These buildings are occupied, there's cost implications of the work that we do, and there's huge benefits too from a standpoint of reducing operating costs, improving indoor air quality, so huge benefits as well, but difficult work to do in existing construction. So back in 2018, Governor Inslee, it was governor request legislation, the state passed the Clean Buildings Law. So this is an energy performance standard that is focused on the largest buildings here in the state of Washington. I know everybody, for the most part in this room, is working in housing and affordable housing, multifamily. Really important to keep in mind, this law for buildings over 50,000 square feet does not apply to multifamily buildings at this point in time, but we do have an incentive program that's available that multifamily buildings can participate in. So this law basically requires for all covered buildings that buildings complete an energy management plan, operations and maintenance plan, and benchmark the building through Portfolio Manager. So these are really powerful tools to reduce operating costs and improve comfort in existing buildings. Focuses on low cost, no cost work that we can do to make buildings more efficient. Those buildings that are over the targets that we've set through rulemaking then need to make capital improvements to those buildings to reduce their energy use. Again, I mentioned that incentive program. Any multifamily building owners or occupants, please reach out to us if you want to learn more about that. It's 85 cents per square foot if you want to come into compliance with this standard, and it can be paired with all of the other incentives out there that are available. So utility incentives, it can be paired with CPACER financing. So you're going to hear a lot about building that capital stack to make projects work, and this is a great tool to get there. So mandatory compliance for covered buildings starts in 2026 and is on a rolling basis for the next 3 years, and its compliance is on 5-year cycles. Okay, shifting gears a little bit, Clean Buildings Tier 2. So back in 2022, the Washington State Legislature passed a bill that expanded the Clean Buildings Law. So important to keep in mind, this expansion bill does cover multifamily buildings. So buildings between 20,000 and 50,000 square feet and all multifamily buildings over 20,000 square feet will need to comply with this law. The law at this point in time is not a performance standard. So there's not an energy budget that needs to be met. It's merely a reporting requirement. So multifamily building owners over 20,000 square feet will need to benchmark operations and maintenance plan and energy management plan and report to Commerce by 2027. So there's also an incentive program that is available for this Tier 2 program as well. It's 30 cents per square foot, and I do want to note that Commerce, I'll talk about rulemaking here in the next slide, but Commerce is going through rulemaking and we're doing program development for that incentive program. The law, as it was written, allows us to provide an enhanced incentive to multifamily building owners who are willing to agree to anti-displacement provisions. We're going to be hosting some public workshops about how we structure that program, and we would love your input. We would love to have you involved in that discussion. So again, please feel free to reach out to that contact information that we have posted and visit our webpage. How am I doing on time, Kate? 3 more minutes? Okay, I gotta speed it up. Okay, so this Tier 2 timeline I thought would be interesting for you all to get a bit more information about, because we've been going through rulemaking and we are just getting ready to wrap up that process. It's not too late to submit comments. So we have hosted a series of 6 public workshops. We've traveled the state doing in-person engagement as well, really getting as much input as we can from building owners about how to structure this law. As I mentioned, we're gonna do some public workshops around the incentive program, and we would love your active participation in that. Your comments and your input really do influence how we structure these programs, so please, please provide that input. This is just a summary of our rulemaking schedule. Has anybody participated in our rulemaking workshops? We got one. I know Max has been there. Yeah. So again, it's not too late to have input. You could submit comments through our website, and again, we'll be having workshops about that incentive program. Okay, shifting gears a little bit. As Kate mentioned, the Inflation Reduction Act included incredible provisions around energy efficiency, renewables, conservation, et cetera. 2 main programs I wanted to talk about really, really briefly today are the home energy rebates programs, of which multifamily buildings will be eligible for those incentives and rebates. So there was 2 main programs that passed. There's a whole home performance incentive program. So we're looking at making existing construction as efficient as we can, and it's gauging the reduced energy use in those buildings. So that's called the HOMES program. And then we also have a rebate program. We'll be launching a rebate program for high efficiency electric equipment. So we're going to be looking to install heat pumps for space heating and cooling, heat pump water heaters for water heating. We'll be looking at induction stoves, heat pump dryers, all kinds of high efficiency electric equipment. So there is $166 million available from the federal government. Timeline for those funds is through 2031, so we have a really nice long time horizon for that. We're expecting funds to come in through the state in mid-2024. Commerce has been hosting a number of listening sessions and workshops to get input on program design. We do have requirements from Department of Energy, and we also have a lot of flexibility within the state to design those programs in a way that's going to work as well as they can for building owners and occupants. I also wanted to mention real briefly, in the last legislative session, there was $80 million that was authorized from the climate commitment account to pay for high efficiency electric equipment. So again, the focus there is going to be on heat pumps and other high efficiency electric equipment technology. So between those 2 programs, it's about $225 million, which is an incredible opportunity for us to think about improving that existing building stock that we have here in the state of Washington. In summary, this slide has hyperlinks to almost all of our energy-related programs, grants, incentives available through Department of Commerce. There's many other programs available through housing and all of our different divisions. So this summarizes the funding that's coming in through the energy division. I imagine the slides will be available. So these are all hyperlinks that'll take you to those web pages. All of our programs have the ability to sign up to receive updates on when funding becomes available. So I'd encourage everybody to spend some time there. Okay, how did I do? Did we good? Okay. Contact information there, buildings at commerce.wow.gov is the email inbox that's monitored by whole staff. Any questions you have building related, if we can't answer it, we can at least get it to a staff member who can help. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Emily. That was impressive. Yeah. All right, so next up is David Reddy. We're happy to welcome him today. He's the principal of O'Brien 360's Building Performance Group. He has more than 15 years' experience analyzing the performance of buildings, from single-family homes to sports stadiums. David enjoys helping clients make informed decisions on efficiency measures and expanding the use of actual performance data to inform the building design process. And David will be speaking to us about what is happening with the 2021 Energy Code. So thank you, David.
Thank you, Kate. Morning, everybody. So as Emily kind of alluded to, one of the prongs in achieving state goals on energy performance is the Energy Code. So I'm going to talk to you today about the 2021 code update. I'm sure a lot of you have been following some of the news and changes and effective dates, and I'm going to touch on that a little bit today. So just to kind of level set on the codes, just so everybody's aware, there are 2 energy codes in our state, one for residential buildings, 3 stories and less, multifamily and single-family homes, and then 4 stories and above commercial, covering larger multifamily and other commercial buildings. So just keep in mind when we talk about the energy code, you could be in one or the other. And where is the code going? Well, as you all have experienced, in each code cycle, the code gets more stringent, and that's based on a state goal of reducing the energy use in new construction by 70% by the 2030 code cycle. So it's all driven by law, and these changes are all made on trying to achieve that goal. There are some studies that have been done to track that progress, and in each code cycle, and in general, the codes are on track to achieve that goal. And then Seattle, which maintains their own commercial energy code, has similar goals based on emissions, but that's why their code also advances every cycle. And where is the 2021 code now? Some of you probably were expecting them to go into effect in July, but if you weren't following the news, there was a lawsuit levied against the State Building Code Council over basically challenges related to Federal Energy Policy and Conservation Act rules, which I'm not an attorney, so I'm sorry if I butcher this, but basically, in essence, the state cannot outright not allow you to use an appliance like a gas water heater or a gas furnace in a building if it meets federal energy efficiency requirements. You can't just say you can't use that appliance, which the new 2021 code, as it was originally drafted, basically was saying you could not use gas water heaters or furnaces anymore. You had to use a heat pump. So there was a lawsuit, and based at around the same time, there was other litigation in California that came to fruition, basically kind of agreeing with that interpretation of the law, and triggered the council to delay the codes and convene the TAG to review proposals to modify it to comply with these federal laws. And around that time in August, the lawsuit was dropped based on the progress towards making those changes. And basically, just even a couple weeks ago, the council voted to move forward changes to the code to allow, in essence, use of gas appliances in Washington State under the 2021 Energy Code, and the new effective date in March 2024. So it's been a whirlwind, and there is a public comment period on the changes to the code that is coming. You'll see previews of the code changes any day now. If you've been attending meetings, they're out there. And in essence, I'm going to kind of talk about what those changes are. And again, keeping in mind that we have 2 code pathways in each code. We have a prescriptive basis, where you do certain measures, you get credits, you meet certain requirements. That's called the prescriptive path in the code. There's also what we call the simulation-based or energy modeling path, and both the residential and commercial code support the same ideas. So there are changes being made to both sections of the code, prescriptive and performance-based path to meet these requirements that the federal law requires. So what are these changes? In essence, both paths will allow the use of fossil fuel appliances in your buildings. So that's a big change from the original draft of the 2021 Energy Code. But in order to, and then another big component of the change was the metrics for the code are based on what's called site energy now. They were originally based on carbon emissions, so, and this gets into a lot of discussion and argument over what is the best metric to quantify the performance of buildings. But the law clearly states that site energy is the metric that building codes should use if they want to kind of have increased stringency on building performance. So that change, and then the changes were made to allow the use of fossil fuel appliances, but the changes, even though you will be able to use them, it will still require the same level of efficiency as if you used a heat pump. That's a very fundamental level, basic. So maintaining the stringency of the code while still allowing gas appliances. So how does that happen? Because on a site energy basis, fossil fuel appliances use more energy than a heat pump does. I think most of you all heard things like a heat pump uses a third of the energy of a electric resistance heater or a furnace. Like those things are true. That's physics. That's on a site energy basis, that is true. So what does that look like? So if you use a heat pump, you have a certain level of building performance. But if you use a fossil fuel appliance for, say, water heating in this case, you will use more site energy for water heating than if you had used heat pumps for water heating. So how do we maintain, if the code originally required you using heat pumps, how do we maintain the same level of energy efficiency while still using a gas appliance? What it will mean is you will have to use other energy efficiency measures to make up for that difference, resulting in the same target performance of the building, even though you're using fossil fuel appliances. That's the kind of fundamental idea of where the code is going to be changed to allow gas appliances. So what this will mean is things like using more PV to offset using fossil fuel appliances, or other reductions in other areas of the building, like building envelope. And for multifamily buildings, because a large component of the energy use is for water heating, it is a pretty, and you want to use a gas water heater in your building, it will require quite a bit of additional energy efficiency. So that's kind of in essence, you can use renewables to make up for that difference. The new rules do allow more use of more renewables, but that's kind of the story of where it's going. And on the topic of renewable energy, so one of the biggest changes in the 2021 code is a pretty substantial minimum required amount of on-site renewable energy, so PV panels in most cases. To put it in context, so the metric is 0.5 watts per square foot. To put it in context, if you're all familiar with the solar option and the 4% tax credit program, you would get credit or points for you putting in a certain size solar array. The code required solar array now is roughly double that size. So it's a pretty significant. You can do other energy efficiency measures to make up for that amount of solar, but this is something that impacts all multifamily above 10,000 square feet in the commercial code. Another big change is scope. So I talked about the applicability of which code you're under depending on your building type. One of the big changes was if you're building a 3-story multifamily building, you would have been under the residential code previously. Now, if you have enclosed corridors in a 3-story or less multifamily building, you'd be under the commercial energy code provisions. So, which to be honest, if you're using more centralized systems, it does, I think, make it potentially easier to comply. I think if you looked at the residential energy code requirements, they're more kind of founded in the idea of using single-family equipment. So weren't really compatible with a lot of these smaller, low-rise, multifamily buildings. And I don't have a slide on this, but one of the things that everybody always with the prescriptive code is the energy efficiency credits table. That's always a section of the code that requires some navigation and kind of trading. What is the best package for my building? Well, I could illustrate it better with a slide, but basically there's way more options to choose from. The metrics for the credits has totally changed. So where you needed 6 credits previously, you now need 45 credits. And it's not that but the things that you adopt are worth more credits. So it's a big change in terms of math, but it will still require understanding what those credits are worth and for what they require you to do, and picking the right package for your building. So that's the 2021 code in a nutshell. There's a lot more to it than that, but those are the big ones. You can expect to really, if you are moving forward with using heat pumps in your buildings for water heating and space heating, primarily for the water heating system, and using at least 50% of your water heating capacity in the larger multifamily buildings, you'll be just fine meeting the 20, in my opinion. Other than the solar. There are other things to consider, but using heat pumps is your safest path through.
Great. Thank you so much, David. I think we all have a better idea of what is going on with the 2021 code. So next up, I'm happy to introduce Erika Coveny. She supports the development of renewable energy resources through a variety of actions and efforts with WSU's energy program. Central among these is managing the Renewable Energy System Incentive Program, tracking and reporting utility net metering capacities, and administering a program she's going to talk about today, the Community Solar Expansion Program. Before joining the energy program, Erika spent 13 years with Snohomish County PUD as the Renewable Energies Program Manager and Business Analyst. So Erika's here today to talk about this really new and exciting solar incentive, so we're happy to welcome her. Thank you.
In case you do want to do solar instead of the heater. I'm going to be reading a little bit more than they were. Lots of numbers. So good morning. I'm Erika Coveny, like she said, with Washington State University Energy Program. And for those of you unfamiliar with what we do, we're a team of program managers, engineers, technical experts, energy specialists, really focused on Washington's environmental well-being. And we work with utilities, businesses, federal and state agencies, and just Washington State residents as partners, as consultants. That's what we do. Let me go ahead and move. Okay, so I'm happy to be here today to let you know about House Bill 1814. I'll give you an overview. In March of last year, Washington State legislators passed the Community Solar Expansion Program and directed my team at Washington State University Energy Team to be the administrator. The program came about as an effort to expand the reach of community solar, specifically to communities who have not been able to benefit from the other solar programs that have come on simply because they don't have the roof space or the finances to involve themselves in those. So specifically, the goal was to broaden the participation and provide benefits to low-income communities in Washington. So House Bill 1814 authorized a $100 million budget to be spent over the next 10 years. And the program allows for up to 100% funding of these projects. The project must benefit either 2 or more individual low-income subscribers or 1 low-income service provider as the subscriber. Over the course of the 10 years, potential program administrators will use our online portal that we developed to apply for what's called pre-certification. And our application portal allows applicants to provide project information and all the required documentation. At this point in the process, when applying for pre-certification, we're asking for a fairly well-baked project plan. And by that I mean we want a one-line diagram, we want a site plan, an interconnection agreement, or something equivalent from the utility saying you're okay to interconnect, that they're aware of your project. And we want a project prospectus. And that is what we're calling tell us your story. Tell us your plan to have this community solar project benefit the low-income community. And as a side, a very unique component of this round of solar incentives, if anyone's familiar with the past, they were production-based, and they're still ongoing. Instead, this project funding has a mechanism for paying for an entire project. How the benefits flow to subscribers is not spelled out in legislation. They do not say they must have a credit on their bill. Nothing like that, which is how a lot of utility community solar projects are designed. The administrators in this can design their own project, design their own program for distributing those benefits, and find innovative methods for doing so. As long as they honor the spirit of the legislation, and as long as those benefits flow to a low-income community, we're actually welcoming creativity. So back to applying. Applicants have 2 years from that pre-certification to complete the project. And then at the 1-year mark, legislation asks that they check in with us. So we're pretty hands-off unless they need to talk to us. At the 1 year, we want a project update, because as we all know, plans change and delays happen, and we need to be able to account for those budgetary changes and new timelines. And we are allowed for extensions. So they're short extensions, but we're reasonable. So upon completion of the project, whether it's 6 months or 2 years, and after the system has been inspected by L&I or whatever jurisdiction does that for that location, the administrator will notify us, and we will hopefully go ahead and certify the system. The utility that is serving that array, that site, is now authorized to make the payment of that incentive. And they have 60 days to do so, to pay the administrator. The paying utility will then take a credit against their tax obligation equal to the amount that they've paid out. And another aside, we've certainly, as most of you maybe have thought about and we've heard, funding can be a real challenge. It's one of the hurdles to this particular piece of legislation, especially for would-be administrators, maybe at a nonprofit, a food bank, finding a way to pay for it up front. Because I said this incentive comes at the end of the project. But luckily, we have some great partners that are working to bridge that gap. We've had conversations about loans, that sort of thing. We're not directly involved with that, but we are certainly working with partners to see how that bridge can be gapped for funding up front. And, we're a sure thing, right? We're going to pay that incentive. We're going to authorize the utility to pay it. So even a loan, is pretty low risk. Okay, so size. Legislation allows for system size, not huge, 12 kW in DC up to 199. And that said, the overall project can be larger, and we've had some of those come through, with a specified portion to be obligated for this program and for low income. And in that case, the incentive is going to be proportionate. Because again, up to 100% of that project can be eligible for the incentive. And I will say, though, legislation does limit the funding to components and fees, that are directly associated with the generation. So we're not going to replace a rooftop, for example. The target cost is $225 per watt DC for solar and $600 for kilowatt hour for storage. I won't get into storage, but that is a possibility as well. Has to make sense, but there is money for that. These targets are completely that, and if they're outside of that bounds, we just talk to. We've had somebody get more bids because we always want you to get at least 3 bids. Anyway. Okay, so finally, the Community Solar Expansion Program's legislative language is very specific about who can administer a project and who can be the beneficiary. So the project must have a nonprofit whose mission is to serve low-income community, or a utility, or a local or tribal housing authority. That's who can be the administrator. And then the projects, like I said, must have at least 2 subscribers that are low-income or 1 low-income service provider. And as a side note, legislation is silent on who must own the project, so that doesn't matter. So there's plenty more to this Community Solar Expansion Program, and if you love reading legislation, it's House Bill 1814, or else you can come to our webpage. We've got an FAQ. We love having conversations. We do a lot, and we'll even come to you. We love traveling around, so it gets us out of our houses, not office houses. Okay, so status since this passed, 17 projects have been submitted. 10 we have given the pre-certification okay for construction. Those amount to about 2.1 million out of 100, so you can see we have a very hefty budget, so that's why I will go back to pretty well-baked plans, because you're not competing, we're not going to run out of money very quickly. We hope to, but, and then that's about 1.3 megawatts in capacity combined. So I thank you very much, and lots of extra information on our website, and really we do love to talk to my partner Phil Liu, who some of you might know, and I. Thank you.
Thank you, Erika. And for any of you who are working in new construction and are planning to have solar on that new construction, please do reach out to Erika to see if this program is a good fit. Affordable housing is a great nexus for this program. And Max Benson, who's up next, will speak a little bit about that. So Max is the Director of Real Estate Development for Community Frameworks, a 50-year-old nonprofit. His department develops rental housing in Spokane for Frameworks' portfolio, but also acts as a fee-for-service developer for other nonprofits and housing authorities around the state. They currently have active projects in Spokane, Bellingham, Southwest Washington, and the Tri-Cities. Over Max's nearly 20 years of experience, he's been successful in using renewable energy tax credits, utility incentives, and WSU's new program about community solar. And today, Max will provide a developer's perspective on all of these programs to round out our panel today. So welcome, Max.
Can you hear me? Okay. I like to pace, so they gave me one of these. We're a small developer. We've got 5 or 6 developers on our staff. But we use all these programs and have for a long time, which is why I was asked to sort of be here. I'm obviously not a policy person, I'm a developer, and I just wanted to kind of explain from my perspective where sort of the juice is worth the squeeze. And there is so many new resources, so many new requirements. It's hard for all of us to kind of keep track and digest all of it. So I wanted to kind of provide my perspective of where everything is and things that are easy to access. Okay, so I'm going to cover the utility incentives, solar tax credits. I'm going to mention 45L credits, and then my recommendation. And then I just wanted to, in all of my slides, so real buildings where we really use these things. So this project is Cinto Commons. I just saw the developer sitting right there. It's a, 47-unit family project, 1, 2, and 3 bedroom units. It's out in Spokane. If you come next year, Housing Washington, this is just like about a mile north of downtown, just kind of just past the arena, kind of gentrifying area. So we're really glad we were able to provide some family housing in an area that's rapidly so forth. So on the bottom slide there, you can see a bunch of solar. So utility incentives. So we kind of think of just sort of energy efficiency. It used to be back in the day, they'd say, oh, you're doing upgraded windows, we'll give you a little bit of money here. Nowadays, for folks that maybe aren't aware, some of the utilities are giving money for solar, for PV chargers, and so forth. Sometimes you have to go through multiple departments within the utility. So you might reach out to PSE and talk to them about utility incentives, but you might not be reaching out to everyone at PSE you need to talk to get all of the possible incentives. So reach out really, really early to make sure you know about all of the resources your utility has. My experience is that the publicly traded utilities typically have more incentives than the PUDs, just my personal thing. One of the things that also can be a big deal is, for those of us who are working in the tax credit program, we get points to use a utility modeler. I know that Willdan got on the approved list with the commission. Willdan's out of the Midwest. Anyone here from Willdan? Okay. They got a contract with PSE and Snohomish PUD to administer their utility incentive programs. And I don't know, it saves us 10, 15 grand by having them do their utility modeling as opposed to having to hire a third party, and you don't have to go through procurement. So bonus points there. So if you're doing a tax credit project in particular, you just really need to start early. The best way to use these these incentives in a tax credit deal is to have the commitment super duper early. That way you can have it come to the sponsor and be a sponsor loan into the deal. And if that's not possible, and it isn't always, then you can have those funds come into the deal as a managing member capital contribution. I've never had anyone push back on that. For tax credit developers, this is hopefully a review. So this project is a cool project we did also in Spokane. Sorry, I did these slides a little last minute, so it's heavily representative of Community Frameworks portfolio. But this project is in sort of a big revitalization area. There was a used car lot on sort of this main street, and so we put a 36-unit project. So it's an 18-unit sort of apartment building, and then on the back side, we had like 3/4 of a block, so we did townhouses. So we've got like 18 townhouses there, a lot of 18 three-bedroom units. Oh, and then you can see the solar there. So this is a ballast-mounted thing. This is what we do on almost all of our projects because we mostly have flat roofs, and so you can kind of see these, so I didn't grab the pointer. These are kind of like CMU blocks, that kind of hold it down on the roof. So there's no penetrations or anything like that. So for new developments, this is one of the easiest funding sources you'll use. So we all know if you're doing a capital stack, you've got all these different funders, and we appreciate all their money, but it is one more person you've got to talk to, one more person you've got to coordinate, one more set of docs you've got to deal with. We want all the money, but it is a lot to coordinate. So this is new money, but no new agreements. It's just money. So the way we do it is, and this is the way I've done it historically, when I do my RFP for my investor, I include I say, give me pricing for tax credits. We might do tax credits. I don't commit to it, so I don't typically have it in the projections themselves. But then when I get my general contractor on board, he gives me pricing. I say, hey, I want to do $100,000 worth of solar. Give me an adult for that, or whatever I think I might be. And then towards the end of the project, if I've got contingency left over, I've used it for solar, and then on top of being able to use my contingency, I'm getting a 30% boost, or roughly, for the renewable energy tax credits. If you are looking at a bunch of materials, if this is all new to you, these are all investment tax credits, not production tax credits, investment tax credits. And it has fluctuated over the years between 30% and something in the 20s. One of the things that the IRA did is it made it 30%. It is 30% for the next 10 years. You don't have to worry about that. Okay, so kind of going forward, did I tell you what deal that was? Okay, so this is a project up in Bellingham. It's a client project. I saw some folks from Opportunity Council here. This is 22 North. It is a 40-unit. We would have done bigger, but we used the whole site. And maximum, it's 5 stories. That was as tall as we could go. PSH project, 24-hour staffing. Half of the units are for homeless 18 to 24-year-olds, which is a particularly rough population. All studios. You can see the roof is got a lot of solar on it. Okay, so kind of going forward, I'm still going to do including the solar in the RFP. I'm still going to include it in my LPA, but basically I'm going to kind of commit to it now, and this is what I would recommend everyone doing. I mean, also building code, you got to anyway. So you're going to have to do an iterative process between looking at how much roof area you have and kind of what you can fit up there, allowing room for all of those heat pumps and other mechanical stuff that you have there. So there's a balancing act of how much can I fit, and then kind of how much can I afford. I've been also trying to estimate what our house meter is, and trying to have a goal of zeroing out the house meter. And I mean, I guess you have to do it anyway, but this is a huge deal. You know, it reduces your risk of sort of energy inflation and lowers your OpEx and all of that good stuff. So one of the things I wanted to say here is, you know, talk with your CPA. They've done this before. Talk with your tax credit attorney and talk with your investor about all of this. One of the things here I mentioned is that there's all these sort of bonus credits, essentially, in the Inflation Reduction Act. It is a lot. There's like 6 bonus categories. So if you're doing a tribal deal, there's a bonus for that. If you're doing a deal that's in a new market tax credit eligible zone, even though it's not a new market tax credit deal, there's a bonus you can get for that. Some of these bonuses can stack. Theoretically, the tax credits could pay for 70% of the solar, but getting it from 30 up to 40 or up to 50, I think, is pretty doable. But taking a step back, we've also got the WSU program. So I ran it past a solar guy that I work with, and I said, hey, if we need to generate this much, like the 199 kilowatt that you were talking about, I said, solar panels are, what did I say here? They're about 400 watts each. They're 23 square feet each. Kind of doing the math, to get up to that 199, we need 11,422 square feet. So let's just round up to 15,000 because you got to be able to walk around them. So how big's your roof? You know, 15,000 square feet is pretty big. You know, if you're doing big 2-story, 4% deals, you know, maybe you have a lot of roof area and you can do a ton more. But if you're doing a more urban project, WSU's program, renewable energy tax credits, done. Keep it simple. If you are doing kind of a bigger project with a lot of roof area, then maybe you should be looking at these boosters, in my opinion. Okay, this project is a really cool project. We tore down our old offices and, oh, gotta hurry up. Tore down our old offices, built like a 33-unit project. This was back when the trust fund didn't have any money, so we were real proud of ourselves for squeezing a deal out. Some of you are like, oh yeah. And then we got some shade for using so much. Okay. Okay, but we still got solar on the roof, okay. 45L credits. I've kind of gotten halfway here. I haven't actually used one of these, but I have included it in my LPA and my you know, and so forth. These are kind of some projects here. So if you get these credits by right if you meet Energy Star. If you're doing Davis-Bacon, so if you've already got a Davis-Bacon job, it's $2,000 a unit. If you're not meeting Davis-Bacon, it's only $500 a unit. And if you're doing net zero ready, then you get more money. My only advice here is when you're getting your kind of blower door people, commissioning people, all that stuff, make sure that they're on the approved Energy Star list. The deal that I kind of got it partway through, awesome firm we're working with, but they're not on that list, and that's why we're not claiming those credits. And this credit's been around a long time, but it used to be limited to 3-story buildings. Now it can be used for any building. So, okay, so recommendations for developers. Use these things. WSU's program is really easy to use. I mean, our projects, you know, we just say like, we're serving low-income people. We're going to use the money to try to keep rents low, and we're going to use the money to help provide more services than we'd be able to otherwise. Good job. You're approved. We liked working with them. If you're, I know there's some asset managers in the room. If you're an asset manager, so WSU's program is still usable. If you put a new roof or you've got a newish roof, why not, improve your OpEx and get some solar? Do that. The clean energy early adopter thing, that was all carrots, and it is carrots, and you should use that. But there will be sticks later, so why not get ahead of it and use that? The utility incentives, all these other bonuses. Oh, and then the other thing I was going to say, something that I don't know enough about, because there's only so much you can keep track of. With regard to the credits, normally you need like a taxable liability. You're doing a tax credit deal. It's super easy to include renewable energy tax credits. They did in the IRA have something called a direct pay incentive. So nonprofits, housing authorities, municipalities, tribal governments can get cash instead of the tax credit. I don't believe they have released the guidance on that yet. But it is coming, so asset managers in particular, hey, look at this. Oh, and then this project is called Lilac Plaza. We usually do smaller projects like 50 units or some. This is a 174 unit project we did. It was a kind of old 236, 202 tower in a park deal. The roof is covered in cell phones. So you can see on the right-hand side there, we did like 380, something like that. It was the biggest solar array in Spokane County when it was done. Maybe it still is. Those are not eligible for the WSU program, but they are eligible in the Renewable Energy Tax Credit program because they were not carports, they are solar support structures that people happen to park underneath. So, so talk with your CPA, make sure it's approved. I'm not providing tax advice, or talk with your attorney, but you're gonna have to get creative, yeah. And I'm done. Of course, yeah.
Great, thank you so much, Max. All right, we're moving on to the Q&A section. But before we do that, I just want to shout out to this new resource library that we have on the Commission's webpage. So you go to multifamily, drop down to energy incentives. If you weren't taking many notes today and you were like, man, I know I'm going to forget something, what this is it's a chronological resource library currently focused on the Inflation Reduction Act, but we will be adding the WSU program and others. We wanted like an easy linked one-stop shop for you. So when you're sort of looking at your projects, you can see what is some of the latest guidance available. And then secondly, there is a survey open now, not to be confused with the survey you might take about this panel. This survey is for asset managers, owners, and authorized signers of existing multifamily affordable housing properties. We sent the email out on Monday. And what we're trying to do is get some more data around the energy and sort of climate priorities of those buildings. There's a gift basket. There are 2 gift baskets. Please make sure someone at your organization, if this falls within your category, fills out this survey. You can maybe win a gift basket. QR code, link here. Shout out to my renewable energy graduate intern, Ben Brown, for all of his work designing this survey. It's really awesome. And with that, we'll just thank you so much for being here. For those of you who have questions, we've got a mic. Please do speak into the mic so we can all hear you. It's a pretty packed room. And then our panelists will be passing around a microphone up top so we can answer them. So raise your hand if you have questions. We've got one in the back.
My question is just a clarification for Max. Did you mention that the 45L credit can be taken by nonprofit organizations who don't have a tax liability?
No, not to my knowledge. Obviously, talk with your CPA. The investment tax credit program they're going to release guidance, and the investment tax credit program will be able to be used by nonprofits, municipalities, housing authorities, tribal governments, but they haven't released guidance on it to my knowledge, so I can't provide any guidance.
Thank you.
Yeah, sounds like stay tuned. All right, next question. I see a hand up here, maybe 3rd row from the front.
Hi, Kasima Lee, Beacon Development Group. Hi, so I had a question about insurance for solar projects. So a lot of insurers have been pulling out of multifamily projects that have solar panels on top because of liability reasons, mostly in California. So I was wondering if you could speak a little bit about that.
Well, I can't speak to what's going on in California because I only work in Washington State, but I have not heard anything from our asset managers or any of our clients about any issues there. Most of our solar is on like a white TPO membrane roof, and it's ballast mounted. I mean, I guess because you've got electrical equipment up there. The only thing I've ever heard of being an issue are like squirrels getting in there. So, you know, because they like to chew on stuff. And so you should have an O&M plan, and you should make sure you don't have squirrel nests or other rodents up there. But a lot of our buildings are 3 stories and up. Hopefully maybe you don't have points of entry, you know, good pest management. I talk with your insurance company and see if they're having issues.
Thank you.
Great, thank you.
Hi, Robert McMaster with Compass Housing Alliance. For the Washington State Energy Program, are there any funds available for either maintenance and repairs and replacement reserves for solar facilities? And are there any funds available to pay the financing points and the loan interest if you have to pull a loan to finance the program before they fund? And lastly, are there any funds for design that can come out of it, or do we have to fund that other sources of the property?
Yeah, good question. So we'll pass it over to Erika.
Yeah, so the first question was, yeah, no. There are, yes, fees are allowed. It gives examples. Yeah, I don't think so. Yeah, no.
So I mean, on a new construction deal, you know, we just roll this into our normal construction loan, and it's just straightforward. On existing portfolios, it's not an eligible expense,
Yeah,
you were saying.
yeah.
I can say, like, for larger nonprofits, they might be able to just handle that internally. For smaller nonprofits, I'm assuming probably smaller deals. I know Craft 3 was really excited, and I'm sure some of the other CDFIs. Is anyone here in a CDFI who'd love to lend on these deals? Okay, well, I know Craft 3 is, so talk with them.
Yeah, there are, engineering fees, design, that sort of thing. Like I said, they give some examples of what can be covered in that. And then I will mention there's also administrative, up to $20,000 for administrative, which is separate, and that you apply for upon certification. So there's money for that.
Great, and we have time for just one more question. I see a hand over by the wall. Sorry to interrupt there, Max.
So from the presentation, there's quite a few different incentives and programs going on. Are there any incentives or programming around multifamily strategic energy management planning, policies and procedures, operations and maintenance, support for owners? I mean, this area is kind of a new adopter to different energy technologies, and some of us are housing authorities and looking for support around developing policies and procedures across our portfolio. Does that exist? Is that a program that's available, or are there incentives around that?
I can at least speak to some of, like, some of the utilities have played with SEM kind of incentive programs, but I don't know of any that are active right now, but maybe.
So yeah, I can speak about that real briefly with existing multifamily in the state clean buildings law. So we do have the 2 incentive programs that are available. It's a performance-based incentive for the larger buildings, but it does include energy management and operations and maintenance. So while it doesn't pay for the strategic energy management specifically, it's an overall incentive at 85 cents per square foot. For the smaller buildings, buildings over or between 20,000 and 50,000 square feet, it's a reporting incentive. Again, it covers benchmarking, operations and maintenance, and energy management planning. So strategic energy management would be, part of what we would fund through that incentive. Commerce is working on developing tools, templates, resources, and having technical assistance available. So anybody interested with some, for additional support, please feel free to reach out to us. Depending on what utility service territory you're in, too, you may also have a lot of resources available to you for that. So I'd encourage you to reach out to your utility.
And I just, again, for the asset managers in the room, the WSU program will pay for up to $20,000 of what effectively is developer fee for your asset manager to do this work. So you get it at the end, but asset managers, it's resource restricted. You've got no money. You can get some actual fee to pay for your staff to do this, so you should do this, and then you can potentially do whatever planning you need to do, And the O&M on these is really pretty simple you're, squeegee off the dust.
Great. And on that note, thank you to all of our panelists. Just one more round of applause.